Namaste, hello and welcome back to another video on Hamsavahini Vajra Astra. I'm Ohana. Today's video is going to be about my TBR for the Lady with the Lamp Readathon. Now, the Lady with the Lamp Readathon is a month-long readathon which is dedicated to a particular aspect of a Victorian British history, which is anything and everything related to the medical field. So I'll leave a link to the announcement video for this particular readathon in the description box below, as well as in the overhead cards above for all of you to cross-check. So do please join me further in this video. So now let's come down to the prompts. Now the first prompt is to read a non-fiction work written about Florence Nightingale or written by Florence Nightingale. So I did choose two books written by Florence Nightingale. So the first is called Letters from the Crimea. That's a pretty thick collection of letters and they're very interesting. So I have not really been through this book entirely, but I did browse through a few letters which were very well written, and it speaks about all the correspondences and all the letters which was present between Florence Nightingale and the various heads of the government of Britain at that point of time, as well as the letters which she wrote home and to her very near and dear ones. So it's a very interesting collection talking about the conditions at Scutari during that period of time. And also the next book that I did find very interesting is Florence Nightingale to her nurses, and it's a very interesting collection of all the speeches as well as all the thoughts of Florence Nightingale given to her nurses about what the noble profession of nursing means and what it does inculcate within itself. So these are two books which I did find very interesting, and I'll be reading them for prompt number 1. Now, prompt number 2 is to read a non-fiction work about Victorian Britain, possibly with anything which is related to its medical healthcare system. So there was a wide range of options which were given, which could include anything to deal with surgeons or anatomists or the Victorian grave diggers or the grave robbers, or it could have mentalists, alienists, as well as mad doctors and Victorian medical science experiments, etc. So I did choose a book which was a scientific field which was emerging at that time, and it is called Fatal Evidence, Professor Alfred Swain Taylor and the Dawn of Forensic Medicine by Helen Barrell. And I did speak in length about this book in one of my other videos in which I did make recommendations for this particular readathon. So I will leave a link to that particular video in the description box below, as well as in the overhead cards above for all of you to cross-check. And you could also just scroll down to the place where the chapters are given and you will find this particular book, and where I've talked in length about it. And also this book basically talks about the fact that Alfred Swain Taylor at that point of time was an emerging doctor who was trying to find a way in which he could investigate the causes of death through forensic medicine, and he did come up with various scientific experiments, and most of his notes as well as his the findings, as well as his cases, which he tried to investigate and help in crime, to help in solving crimes, etc., was taken by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, as well as by Wilkie Collins, and they did try to base their novels around them, and the crime novels written during Victorian times was closely associated with most of his findings. So I did find this aspect very interesting, so I did include one of the novels which was written during that time, which was based on this particular book as well, and the findings of this particular doctor. So that will be coming up next, further off in this video, but for this particular prompt, that's the book that I've chosen. Now, prompt number 3 is to read a fiction book about nurses. So for this, I did choose the book In the Shadow of the Lamp by Susan Dunlap. And this is a YA-ish novel. And from the back of the book, it reads as, it's 1854 and 16-year-old Molly would give anything to change her circumstances as a lowly servant in a posh London house. So when she hears of an opportunity to join the nurses who will be traveling with Florence Nightingale to Crimea, she jumps at the chance. The work is grueling, the hospital conditions deplorable, and Miss Nightingale a demanding teacher. Before long, the plight of British soldiers becomes more than just a mission of mercy, as Molly finds that she's falling in love with both a dashing young doctor and a soldier who has joined the army to be near her. But with the battle raging ever nearer, can Molly keep the two men she cares for from harm? A love story to savor and a fascinating behind-the-scenes imagining of the women who became known as the Lady with a Lamp. So I did find this work of fiction very interesting, so that's the book that I have chosen to read for this particular prompt. Now, prompt number 4 is to read a Victorian murder mystery or a Victorian crime novel, which is not a classic. So for this, I did choose a very interesting series written by Tessa Harris, and these are the 3 books. So it is the first of the series is called The Anatomist's Apprentice, which is a Dr. Thomas Silkstone mystery, which has been inspired by a real murder mystery, and it has been investigated and converted into a novel. On the back of the book, it reads as, the death of Lord Edward Crick has unleashed a torrent of gossip through the seedy taverns and elegant ballrooms of Oxfordshire. Few mourn the dissolute young man except his sister, the beautiful Lady Lydia Farrell. When her husband comes under suspicion of murder, she seeks expert help from Dr. Thomas Silkstone, a young anatomist and pioneer forensic detective from Philadelphia. Against his better judgment, he agrees to examine Sir Edward's decomposing corpse and soon learns that it is not only the dead but also the living to whom he must apply the keen blade of his intellect. And the deeper the doctor's investigations go, the greater the risk that he will be consigned to the ranks of the corpses he studies. So this was very interesting, and also in the acknowledgement section of this particular book, there is something very interesting which has been written, which states that this story was inspired by a murder trial at Warwick Assizes in England. It was the first ever known occasion where an expert witness, in this case an anatomist, was called. So I did find this very interesting. Now that is the first in the series, and the second in the series is called The Dead Shall Not Rest, which is again by Tessa Harris. And from the back of the book, it reads as, it is not just the living who are prey to London's criminals and cut purses. Corpses too are fair game, dug up from fresh graves and sold to men for science, for dissection, or men of science for dissection. I do apologize for that. Dr. Thomas Silkstone's unscrupulous rival, John Hunter, has learned of the imminent death of the 8-foot-tall Charles Barn, known as the Irish giant, and is obsessed with obtaining the body for his research. When Hunter is implicated in the horrific murder of a young castrato, Thomas must determine how far the increasingly erratic surgeon will go in the name of knowledge. For as Thomas knows, the blackest hearts sometimes go undetected until it's too late. So that is the second in the series. Now the third in this series is called The Devil's Breath. And from the back of the book, it reads as a mysterious poisonous fog rolls over English countryside, bringing death and destruction in its wake, Dr. Thomas Sidstone uses his considerable skills to investigate why so many people are dying in Oxfordshire and beyond. Amid the chaos and confusion, however, Thomas soon discovers that the fog is not the only killer on the loose. As day merges into night, storms rage and meteorites tear across the sky. Paranoia spreads like wildfire, and many villagers believe the end of the world is nigh. It seems that no one, not even Lady Lydia Farrell, is safe from the impending doom. So I did find this very interesting, and this is the third and the last in the series. So those are the 3 books that I will be reading for this particular prompt. Now, prompt number 5 was to read a Victorian classic novel, which did include elements of feminism or scientific experiments or murders or crimes or poverty or class divides, etc. So I did choose The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins, and it's a sensational novel. And from the back of the book, it reads as, The Woman in White famously opens with Walter Hartwright's eerie encounter on a moonlit London road. Engaged as a drawing master to the beautiful Laurie Fairlie, Walter becomes embroiled in the sinister intrigues of Sir Percival Glyde and his charming friend Count Fosco, who has a taste for white mice, vanilla bonbons and poison. Pursuing questions of identity and insanity along the paths and corridors of the English country houses and madhouse, The Woman in White is the first and the most influential of the Victorian genre that combined Gothic horror with psychological realism. So this was a very interesting pick for me, and in fact this was recommended to me at the beginning of the year by my friend Janelle from Too Fond of Books for the 2022 12 by 12 challenge, in which we read 12 books over a period of 12 months recommended by 12 friends. So this was recommended to me by Janelle, and this is the book that I'll be reading for this particular prompt. Now, prompt number 6 is to read a non-fiction work about accidental poisons used by Victorians in their medicines and daily lives. So for this, I have chosen to read Misjudged Murderesses, Female Injustice in Victorian Britain by Stephen Jacobi. And I've talked in length about this book in one of my other videos, which I have already mentioned about, but I will leave a link to that in the description box below, as well as the timestamp when you can actually find this particular, or where you can find this particular book mentioned. So it's a very interesting book which does talk about how accidentally there were governesses or servants who, or people who were trying to look after a family, who were accidentally poisoning their masters, and they were sentenced to prison, and there were few who did this on purpose. So it's all about the investigations and cases during Victorian Britain, which did conclude that the substances used were poisonous, and they did have lots of arsenic in them, and laudanum was used, as well as there was a heavy dosage of opium which was used. So I'm not too sure how much of opium mention is there in this book, but yes, opium was one of the favorite drugs which was used for calming the nerves at that point of time, and it was given to patients who had nervousness or who had lots of anxiety, and those who had who were deprived of sleep. So this was very interesting, and that's the book that I'll be reading for prompt number 6. Now, the last prompt, which is prompt number 7, is to read a war nurse's memoir, or a fiction which is inspired from a real-life war nurse. So for this, I did go for a memoir, and it's called In the Footsteps of Florence Nightingale, Members of a QA, and QA is Queen Alexandra's Royal Army Nursing Corps by Margaret Thomas. And from the back of this book, it reads as, remember when you are far away up the country, possibly the only English woman there, then these men will note and remember your every action, not only as a nurse, but as a woman, which has been written by Florence Nightingale. Now, when a young northern girl quietly dropped home economics in favor of the 3 sciences against her parents' wishes, little did she expect to rise through the ranks of the Queen Alexandra's Royal Army Nursing Corps the nursing branch of the British Army, and follow in the footsteps of Florence Nightingale, to whom the QAs trace their heritage, healing injured soldiers far from home, as well as educating and recruiting sisters back in Britain. In this heartfelt memoir spanning the 1950s and 60s, Major Margaret Thomas, ARRC, recalls preparing operating theatre supplies for Suez, avoiding the wrath of the President of Ghana, working with the Canadians in a military hospital in Germany, toiling day and night in Singapore with casualties flown in from Borneo, enjoying R&R in Penang, and being presented to the Queen at Buckingham Palace. Through her reminiscence, she learns of the special relationship between troops and the sisters, QAs being a combination of mum and sweetheart, depending on the age of the soldier and the severity of his injuries. Margaret recalls happy, sad, and sometimes hilarious incidents with service patients, and she embodies all that Florence Nightingale hoped for in an army nurse: compassion, skill, discipline, and an appetite for adventure. So I did find this very, very interesting. So that's the book that I'm reading for prompt number 7. Now, 2 books which I do plan on reading, but I have left them as possibilities because I'm not too sure if I'll be able to get through them. But yes, if time does permit, then yes, I probably will be getting my hands on them. The first is The Italian Boy by Sarah Weiss, and this is a very interesting read. I did pick this up last year for the History Challenge, and I would love to reread it again. So this is about the grave diggers and the grave robbers, and I will leave a link to the video in which I did mention about this book in the description box below, as well as in the overhead card above. And also the other book that I am very interested in reading is called Victoria's Children of the Dark by Alan Gallup. Now, this has nothing to do with Victorian medical history, but it does have a lot of history about the plight of children, especially those during the who were residing in the regions of the mining areas. And there was a place called Silkstone, or there was an incident, I'm not too sure about it, but I'll read from the back of the book, which reads as: Victorian Children in the Dark tells a story about Queen Victoria's invisible subjects, women and children who labored beneath her green and pleasant land, harvesting the coal to fuel the furnaces of the Industrial Revolution. Following the real fortunes of 7-year-old Joey Birkinshaw and his family, Alan Gallup recreates the events surrounding the 1838 Husker Pit disaster at Silkstone, Yorkshire. So yes, Silkstone is a place in Yorkshire, a tragedy which helped lead to better working conditions for miners. Chained to carts and toiling half-naked for 18-hour shifts in near darkness, children as young as 4 were employed by mine owners, yet it was not until the catastrophe at Silkstone, when 26 children were drowned in a mine shaft, that Victoria and her subjects realized that many Britons were existing in virtual slavery. This powerful and dramatic account exposes the real life or working conditions of 19th century miners. A gripping human story, Victoria's Children of the Dark brings history, particularly the history of childhood, vividly to life. So this is something which I did find very interesting. Of course, it does not have much to do with Victorian medical health care, but yes, it does have a lot to do with the plight of children and how the poverty did affect them as a working class of individuals. So those are the few books that I plan on reading for this particular readathon. Do let me know what you think about them, if you have read them before, or if you will be reading some of them, or if you would like to participate, because all you need to do to participate is to read one non-fiction or one fiction book based on any of the prompts involved. So do let me know all about it in the comment section below, and I will see you soon next week again with another video. So till then, take care, have a good reading week ahead, and namaste.